As the Independent National Electoral Commission, Inec, moves both personnel and materials to Anambra State in readiness for the governorship election, Inec Chairman Professor Muhammad Yakub has said the Commission will do everything in its powers to ensure only eligible voters determine the next governor of the southeastern states. Nigeria's Inspector General of Police Usman Baba has also sounded a warning that members of the indigenous people of Biafra may disrupt the November 6th Anambra governorship election. Arise correspondent Abel Ejikeme reports.
Major stakeholders are in Nigeria's southeastern Anambra state as people in the previously troubled area gear up for its governorship election. Present in this hall are the Inspector General of Police, representatives of heads of various security and intelligence agencies, chairman of the Electoral Commission, governorship candidates, and civil society groups. For the police chief, the massive deployment of personnel to the state is aimed at reassuring the people of a peaceful election while non-state actors who are bent on disrupting the process are dealt with.
The message here is clear. For the political actors and electorates that are law-abiding, they are fully assured of optimal security. However, for the destabilizing elements and other deviants who, despite all wise counsels, are determined to deploy violence and other illegal means to advance their political interests or constitute a clog in the wheel of peaceful atmosphere for election, they should be prepared for the consequences of their action as they will be identified, isolated, and decisively dealt with irrespective of their status, ideological inclination, and political affiliation.
Chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission says the body is on track to ensure the election is conducted as scheduled. He reveals there are 983 polling units in Anambra State with 0 to 49 registered voters. The Inec boss assures that materials or personnel will not be deployed to units where there are no registered voters.
Out of the 5,720 polling units in Anambra State, 86 polling units representing 1.5% of the total number of polling units have no voters. There are no voters in 86 polling units in Anambra State. The Commission will not be deploying personnel and materials to these polling units. So please have a rest of mind that there will be no results from these polling units without voters. We are deploying nothing. Non-sensitive materials will not be deployed. Sensitive materials will not be deployed. The beavers will not be deployed, and personnel will not be deployed to these polling units. Furthermore, 894 polling units, representing 15.6% of the polling units in the state, have between 1 and 49 voters. Election will hold in these polling units. Even if it is one voter, the Commission owes that Nigerian a responsibility to ensure that he or she is not disenfranchised.
The Chief Electoral Officer says all the Bimodal voter accreditation system or BVAS devices to be used for the governorship election have been configured and brought down to Anambra State. He assures that the device will record a huge success in the governorship election.
This new device replaces the smart card reader used in previous elections since 2015. We are satisfied with the pilot deployment of the BVAS in the Isoko South 1 State Constituency by-election in Delta State on 11th September 2021.
There are concerns about the deployment of the BVAS device.
I have concerns about the new equipment that will be deployed. I think that I don't know what level of sensitization has gone into the communities, because the election is not going to hold only in the capital. Election is holding in the 21 local governments of Anambra, and with the introduction of the electronic transmission equipment of results and the rest of it, I think voters, I want to be able to see how voters understand that and how they are going to be able to adapt to these new changes.
The Electoral Commission says it is prepared to deliver to the people of Anambra State a free and credible election. It's believed the presence of the police chief in the state is assuring and will serve as a confidence booster for the electorate. How much confidence that serves will only be seen on Saturday when the election is scheduled to take place. Abel Ejikeme, Arise News.
Meanwhile, the United States says it will take action against anyone found guilty of undermining the Anambra governorship election. The U.S. warns that visa restrictions could be placed on those guilty of inciting violence during or after the election. The Western nation will be monitoring the polling and is calling for a peaceful vote. Okay, Tundu, your thoughts on this?
I think that INEC are making all the right noises. They're being reassuring to the public, as are the security agencies, because we do have to remember that the right to vote is sacred. We have to also remember that our democracy was fought for. People died for us to have the right to vote. So anything that could impede that process must be discouraged. But you know, the threats remain as they are. The tension remains as it is, and we're just hopeful that by Saturday, a lot of that will be dispelled and people can come out and exercise their franchise, adding to the layers of complexity. I mean, because INEC referred to, I was reading a statement by Festus Ikoyi, an INEC commissioner, talking about how INEC was able to deliver in Edo and Ondo, and we all recall that at the time it was felt that it would just be so tense and near impossible, and INEC, you know, did the impossible then. So I think it's trying to be a reassuring, but added to the complexities of this particular election, which is different from Edo and which is different from Ondo, is the fact that they have scrapped the smart card readers and they're now introducing this BVAS. Biometric, what's it called? Voter accreditation system, BVAS. And it's a two-tier accreditation system, which I think improves security. You have your facial identification, not just your fingerprints, which is great. But that point that the gentleman from Yaga raised in that report is true, because it might cause another layer of complexity. So I'm really quite concerned about that.
Okay, I think it's good to see the various parties in the Interagency Election Security Committee, including the security agencies, INEC, the state government, and other stakeholders coming together to build confidence, to boost confidence ahead of the gubernatorial election that will take place in Anambra in 48 hours. On the part of INEC, INEC has consistently said it is ready. Also, Anambra is going to provide an opportunity for INEC to test for the second time this biometric verification accreditation, biometric voters accreditation system. They tested it previously in Delta State, and now they're going to put it out there in Anambra State. They have on display 5,720 polling units. Out of these 5,720 polling units, there will be no voters in about 86 polling units. But in the other polling units, there will be voters. And the INEC chairman used the opportunity of that engagement with traditional rulers, civil society organizations, and others yesterday to roll out the guidelines again and how strict INEC intends to be in delivering credible, fair elections. The credibility of the election is important. Voter turnout is important because all of this will relate to the legitimacy of the process itself. An election should be conducted, but it should also have been seen to have been conducted. And that's where the deployment of materials are coming. You recall that Anambra got additional polling units, over 1,000, about 1,112, in addition to about 4,000 plus that they had before. So, which was in line with, the upgrading of the polling system by INEC. At the time, there were controversies, but INEC was able to survive that. So it's good to hear that INEC is ready, that polling materials have already been put in a safe place, in a bank, and that very early on November 6th, that these materials will be deployed. So in terms of process, INEC has given us an account of what it has done. However, as they say, the taste of the pudding is in the eating. It's not enough for us to have this report. It is for us, after the process, to assess what INEC has been able to achieve on the basis of its own promises. As for the security agencies, yes, the Inspector General of Police was very firm in saying he will follow the directives of the Commander-in-Chief, which is that nobody, non-state actor or whoever, will be allowed to disrupt the process. I told you that when we went to Anambra, Oka specifically, to moderate the Anambra governorship election. On our way back, we saw massive deployment of security personnel, both military and police. And in fact, we understand that the DSS is also fully on the ground. But the Inspector General of Police made a point that the security presence is not to intimidate voters. It's not to disrupt the process. It is to facilitate the process. And I think it's important that not just the police, but also the military and also the Department of State Security, follow that line. The objective we look forward to is not to intimidate people. But I had a direct experience of it when we went to conduct the interview, the debate. Security was provided by the Nigerian Army. We had entering the state and going out, soldiers in front, a deployment in front, another deployment behind our vehicles. They provided security for the Arise News crew. Both crew and, team, every one of us. And they did a good job. Some other media houses chickened out of that event. They didn't want to go there. But we went there and we came back. Okay, yeah, that's at the level of journalism. But what is more important is also ensuring that security is provided for those who have the big stake in the matter, the voters who will go there and vote. And that's what we look forward to. It should be, I don't want to sit down here and say, oh, why was the Nigerian state able to provide security for journalists? And the same state could not provide security for the people who matter more or who matter most in this particular engagement. Now, the other issue has to do with a statement from the United States. Yes, often the United States will say, well, if anybody misbehaves, we will not give that person a visa to the United States. Yeah, that's fine. That's a way of reminding the people of Anambra that this is not just an isolated village affair. This is an international affair. The whole world is watching. And the people of Anambra should also be mindful of this and ensure that, they don't become a major, their community does not become a major spot for national and international embarrassment. And the people, I think, on the basis of the various assurances that have been given, should go out and vote and exercise their franchise. The Nigerian state has given them that assurance, and I think that, they should have faith in the Nigerian state rather than in non-state actors. Because all of this, will have implications for how the state turns out and the welfare of the people after, the tenure of the present governor ends in February 2022.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Batianchino, for that. On the third day of the search and rescue mission, following the collapse of the 21-story building in Ikoyi, not a single survivor emerged from the rubble. The Lagos State government has announced the formation of an extra investigative panel to determine the cause of the collapse and identify persons, if any possible, responsible for all of this. Adefemi Akinsoya reports.
For the first time since the 21-story building collapse, night has fallen without anyone being pulled from the wreckage alive. Authorities here say they are still optimistic more survivors will be found. But for this father, hopes for a happy ending have been dashed.
It's my son, Emmanuel Adeiga. So that they work to Mr. Femi Oshibono. Mr. Femi Oshibono is my brother. So that he's supposed to Mr. Femi say me come and carry my son because he do PA for Mr. Femi Oshibono. So that on Monday, people come for Lagos. Something don't happen for that building, don't collapse. Now I come, they come here. Early in the morning, this morning, now I see the body. So that I never see my pikin again. So that at the age of my pikin is 20 years old.
The arrival of the Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, came with a sense of order to the disarray.
I've set up a high-powered commission of inquiry. It's a strong professional investigative panel that are consisting of everybody from outside of government. And I'll roll out the names of the members. It's a 5-member with 1 secretary that's also external, and they've been given a clear terms of reference. Right. Later today, I will be meeting with some of them, and we'll identify where they're going to work from, and we're going to give them a 30-day assignment for them to wrap up and tell us, indeed, professionally what had gone wrong here and who are the culprits and what do we need to do.
He confirmed there was no manifest, no way of knowing the names or the number of people on the premises when the building came down. But he set up an information desk, families finally able to formally declare their people missing and release any pent-up emotions in the process. But any relief is short-lived, their worry growing as they wait. The close-up site itself has been closed to the general public, and it's easy to understand why. Wreckage, rubble and ruin. 21 stories came down, and left behind are two groups in a face-off. Families who say they won't leave, and authorities who say they won't stop searching until they reach ground zero. Adefemi Akinsanya, Arise News, Ikoyi, here in Lagos.
All right, so joining us now from the collapsed building site in Ikoyi to give us updates is Adefemi Akinsanya. Femi, great to have you. Femi, anything new?
Good morning to you all there. Unfortunately, we've not been hearing any news of the death toll rising or any survivors being pulled from the rubble since last night into this morning. One thing we do know that investigative panel that was set up or announced by the Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu yesterday will formally be inaugurated at 11 o'clock local time at the LASWA, that's the Lagos State Waterways Authority, very close to this point, also in Ikoyi, the Falamo area. That will be inaugurated then at 11 o'clock today. In addition to that, we are still here on the streets. Just behind our camera, there's many people still here, families who hadn't left, people who haven't left since Monday, unfortunately, still waiting for a bit more information on the regards of their loved ones. You can see the streets here, there are lots of cars. This is what happened yesterday. In the early parts of the morning, this roadway will be reopened and cars are allowed to pass through while you'd imagine the rescue operations continue in the background there. You can see the excavation machines, and though it is quite still a huge heap of rubble there, it's considerably far less than what it was yesterday and of course the days before then, and that's because the rubble is being lifted from one area to the other. I told you that Lagos State authorities, most especially NEMA, say that they are still optimistic, even at this juncture, that they will pull more survivors alive from that rubble. Unfortunately, that's not been the case as far as we've heard this morning, but here on the streets, especially when you see the families still lodged out here, they are still very hopeful. Behind me there, those colourful tents, is the information desk that was set up by the Lagos State government to allow people to come and formally declare their loved ones missing and find out any type of update on what's happening there. There doesn't seem to be too much operation happening. It may well be that the people are only just setting up for the morning, but indeed many families have been here overnight and they say they're not leaving until they find out what's happened to their loved ones.
Okay, Adefemi, very quickly. The aggrieved parents, relatives who have been at that site, yes, we understand the help desk has been set up. But many of these concerned families want access to the mortuary. Is there any talk about granting them access to the mortuary? Secondly, what is the reaction to the fact that there's now a document, in circulation indicating that indeed only 15 floors were approved by the Department of Physical and Urban Planning, as opposed to the 21 that the Deputy Governor claimed was approved, because there was a contradiction between the head of LAPSCA, that's the Building Control Agency, and the Deputy Governor as to whether the approved number was 15 floors or 21 floors. Do you have any details in these two regards?
Absolutely. Let's start with the mortuaries. What we're hearing is that it will be this morning, or at least throughout the course of today, that families will be able to formally identify the bodies of the people who have been taken to Bagada, which is where the mortuary for corpses who were pulled from this scene will be. Yesterday, you did have family members who were quite upset, and they expressed their concerns to the Lagos State Governor, saying that they had been to the hospital, and not only were they unable to see people who they thought were dead and known to them, they weren't able
able to find any type of information onto when the bodies would be released to them and returned home. It's expected that that process will formally start today. But to answer your second question, yes, I saw that document floating around social media yesterday in the afternoon and towards the early part of the evening, and I did put that document and ask the Lagos State Press Secretary about that, and what they responded with was a very swift denial of that document as being a fake. It is interesting though, because on that document we've seen, though it has not been validated by the Lagos State government, they did say, the document rather does say that all 3 buildings were approved to be 15 floors, but as you rightfully put it, the Deputy Lagos State Governor on Tuesday told the press that the building in particular, the one that came down, was approved for 21. We've seen this document that says otherwise, and Lagos State have not yet released any document proving that it was in fact 21 stories. So that again adds to the frustration of the people on the ground here, and that raises more questions as to why this building came down, who's responsible for it. And as I said, the panel set up by the Lagos State Governor will be inaugurated today, and they've been mandated to have more answers and more information that must be given to the governor, and hopefully then onwards to the people within 30 days.
Adefemi, from this angle from which we're being able to see the scene behind you, it doesn't exactly look like a bustling hive of activity, is it? Are there frantic rescue efforts still going on today on day 4? Is it just from where we're seeing the scene behind you? What's happening with regards to rescue?
I'm not close enough to see or say if it's frantic, but the rescue operations are ongoing. Once we do come off this live, I will be able to go into the gates. Journalists haven't been able to go in with their cameramen, but I will try my hardest to get a bit closer and give you more of an accurate update. And that is, again, another thing that's added into the tensions and the frustration. You can imagine the people who are still hopeful for positive information not being able to feel comfortable with that hope because they don't believe the rescue operation is happening as fast as it should be. You can see the excavation machines happening in the background, but usually, especially on Tuesday when we saw those people being pulled alive from the rubble, it was when the excavation machines had stopped, and then there was an opportunity for the rescue workers to get closer to the rubble and listen out for people. That obviously hasn't happened as I'm speaking to you now, but I can confirm that there is some activity, but I'm not close enough to say whether or not it's frantic. And if you ask the people here, they say it's not moving anywhere near fast enough.
All right. Thank you so much, Femi. Femi, it's obvious we'll still catch up with you in the course of today. Thank you so much. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have Michael Wilson, Adeso Amaro, Aaron Akeja to give us updates on global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. Moving on to global business updates, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
And it's moving towards its tapering program towards the end of November. We'll see how that's actually affected the markets over in Asia Pacific. Generally speaking, they like that. They rose very, very slightly. In mainland China, the Shanghai up 0.6%, Shenzhen Component up by 1.2%, Hong Kong up by about 0.25%, and even in Australia, a slight increase, actually, about 1/3% on their main index there. This is big stuff from China. The latest news from them is that Tencent is launching 3 new chips. What China, as you know, is trying to do is to bolster its efforts in semiconductors. And this is the first time that this organization, this internet giant, has actually publicly spoken about its progress in semiconductors. And obviously it comes as China's trying to boost its semiconductor production. It's been investing in areas including chips and cloud computing to diversify its businesses. That's Tencent. Right, global trade. This is the world's largest trade deal. Includes China, does not include the United States. It comes into force in January next year. Australia and New Zealand are new signatories to it, and that's actually got it going. It's called the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or if you prefer mnemonics, RCEP, and it was signed last year by 15 Asia-Pacific countries. It comes into force January the 1st. It covers a market of 2.2 billion people, $26.2 trillion worth of trade, and it's bigger than the United States, Mexico, Canada agreement, and also bigger than the total trade with the EU as far as the bloc is concerned. So there we are then, the United States, and the Fed announced that it will begin reducing the pace of bond purchases by about $15 billion a month, very much in line with market expectations. Major indices on Wall Street climbed on that news to new record highs. It pushed the markets up there. A full rate hike, though, that's the trick now. When is that going to be? Some of the markets are saying it's not going to be until the end of the summer in 2022. The Bank of England, as you know, announces its decision at noon GMT. The question to hike or not to hike, when, and some people are saying actually to do it too quickly, one would crimp the economy. We know that. But secondly, they might be getting slightly ahead of the game and might be making a big policy mistake. Now, talking about COP26 and oil and all the rest of it, as I was yesterday, now Shell is actually saying in an interview that it needs its oil production to fund its shift to green. No surprises there. Shell plans to transform some of its production from refining petrol and diesel to making biofuels and hydrogen over the next decade. The big news out of COP26, I think for all of us really, is that 190 nations have now agreed to quit coal. Major coal users like Poland, Vietnam and Chile are going to do this probably in the next 10 years or so. UK government said that the coal is the biggest contributor towards climate change in the world, and the UK is saying that 190 nations have agreed to this, but the biggies like Australia, India, China and the United States have so far not done a particular pledge. As far as the UK is concerned, fishing row, that continues, and Brexit minister is now going to France to talk a little bit about there. Macron has suspended, he says, any kind of sanctions until these talks actually produce some kind of fruition, or at least they can get to the table. Well, we'll see. We don't know how that's going to end particularly. In the UK, industry has been hitting out at the business secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, and also the Chancellor. What they're saying is, hang on a second, you said you take practical steps to help us in this energy crisis that we're suffering at the moment. So far, absolutely nothing whatsoever. Complete silence. So industry is quite cross about that. Oil. Now, I was talking yesterday about the influence. First of all, yes, I know that OPEC Plus is meeting and all that, but I think much bigger than that is what's going to happen basically with Iran and the nuclear talks. Now, if that Iran oil comes back onto the markets have already taken that into account in the oil price. So it's not going to be a big reduction in the oil price. It's called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA. That's the thing that Obama actually got together with Iran to try to bring them around a table and talk about it. But again, so we wait for OPEC Plus, and we may get some kind of move as far as Iran is concerned. We may be hearing about that in the weeks ahead. But if it does happen and they do get to some kind of agreement, it will put more oil on the market because Iran is desperate to protect its economy, which has been absolutely savaged by the sanctions against it. And gold had a volatile session yesterday. I mean, basically, it was waiting for the FOMC. It's looking at about 1776 an ounce today, right now. I'm just slightly pausing here because I'm looking at a dollar which is actually falling overnight. That tends to help oil, tends to help gold rather, but it's still around about that $1776 an ounce as we speak. That's your global view this morning.
Right. So we'll quickly go to what happened in America yesterday. A lot of people are really irate with Jay Powell and the Biden administration. In fact, they're saying this is Biden inflation, that Jay Powell didn't take action on time. Finally, tapering has come in. What's going to be the effect of tapering when he is not even certain about what is really causing the inflation? Now he's saying he thinks inflation should be transitory. Formerly, he said inflation was transitory. Now, the tapering will go for a couple of months. I think it will end around March 2022. has a problem already on ground. Janet Yellen can't put a finger on what is happening. She's saying, oh, it's caused by COVID. But there are supply chain challenges that Biden has not been able to solve. Some people are probably saying maybe that was why the Democrats were punished in the last elections in Virginia. What is really happening to the American economy? Is Joe Biden losing the plot? And secondly, this talk about climate change financing. $100 billion is the peg they put on it. How realistic is to get that? Is it to get the money from the Western developed nations to the poorer nations? Because they failed on the target in 2010, 2012 after Paris. What is going to change now?
So as far as the United States is concerned and inflation, nobody knows what causes it, basically. You can look at all the factors, supply chains. We've done this hundreds of times, haven't we, on the programme, and looked at it and so on. I mean, is the Fed actually going too late to the party? Well, what Jay Powell is saying, and remember, he's not reconfirmed in his seat yet. He's saying that we should be patient about interest rate rises. I think that's the most important thing. Tapering's one thing. I think when you start to talk about interest rate rises, I mean, that's a big, big hand on the tiller, isn't it? That's a big break on the economy. That's the interesting thing now. I mean, the markets are priced in, as I was saying yesterday, the fact that there were going to be probably a squeezing of asset purchases. Well, he confirmed that last night. But what he was saying was, we've got to be patient about interest rate rises. Janet Yellen has done this job. She's now Treasury Secretary. It's incumbent upon her as a politician to cast doubt about what's happening in the Fed. I get that. But we've got no idea where the truth is. We feel our way forward. Do you trust what the markets say, or do you trust what politicians say? I leave that as an open question. All I can say is that the markets are sort of pricing in one interest rate rise, maybe in round about summer next year. Maybe taken aback by that. I think equally as important is what the Bank of England's going to do, because some of those people are saying they might act too quickly and then have to reverse progress. So central banks are really feeling their way forward with a white stick now, because nobody's ever been through this before. The other thing was, oh yes, that's right, money for climate change. Okay, so that particular $1 trillion fund that I was talking about yesterday, with the former governor of the Bank of England actually putting all that together, that's supposed to finance businesses going into that in a transitional way. What it means as far as nations are concerned, I don't think it means anything at all. I think that the pledge that I was telling you about, 190 nations actually saying they're going to, at some stage, get rid of coal. India rather, has put a marker on that by saying it's going to be 2070. I mean, we're going to see a lot of transition here, and we're going to see a lot of foot dragging, and we're going to see a lot of conflict between nations that say, hang on, we haven't had our industrial revolution yet. You can talk from there. We're still developing. We need fossil fuels. And also add to that what Shell is saying, as I was reporting on earlier, about they're saying that they need the profits from fossil fuels to fund their transition to greener products. So it's intensely complicated. It's all right, as I keep saying, politicians going to summits and talking about it. The fact of the matter is, as you well know, the difficulty, the devil is in the detail, and that's going to take a long time and will be very, very complicated indeed to work out.
Well, Michael, a number of questions. Let's start with COP26. There's a study by the University of Melbourne in Australia indicating that if all these countries making commitments, 19 saying that they would reduce financing for oil and gas projects, 190 countries signing up to the end of coal as a source of electricity. Now, that Melbourne study says if they were to keep their pledges, that there will be carbon emission reduction up to about 1.9 degrees Celsius, not up to the 1.5 degrees Celsius recommended at the Paris Climate Accord. But that will happen. But is there any guarantee that these countries making all these commitments from Rome to Glasgow would, live up to expectation? And even the financial institutions that have also made some commitments. Second, the Taliban has banned the use of foreign currencies in Afghanistan. They insist that every commercial transaction in Afghanistan should be in Afghanis. This is the same country that has been blocked from foreign aid, that has been blacklisted by central banks, from the United States all the way to Europe, that the IMF has even frozen, its access to credit, and its access, as a sovereign entity, have also been frozen. And now you have the Islamic State in Afghanistan saying you can only transact business in, Afghani, which is their national currency. How is that from an economic point of view? And third, India has decided to cut fuel prices by 5 rupees for petrol, by 10 rupees for diesel. And the whole idea is to encourage consumption and, support the people. It's a kind of subsidy. Where is that money coming from? And does it make sense at a time when the world is talking about reduction of fossil fuel consumption?
Right, so what should we do? Should we do the Taliban first? I have no words explain how on earth that they imagine that Afghanistan is going to survive. I turn that on its head and talk about the Afghan refugees that we have in this country, and I'm sure you've got them too. And amongst those are very, very skilled people. It's not their fault that they're fleeing from the Taliban. We're not just talking about people who have no skills whatsoever, but we're talking about people with considerable skills. And what all the countries around the world is to offer those people safe refuge from this thing called the Taliban, which is clearly in self-destruct mode. I mean, there's no question. How on earth does it expect to survive? How on earth can you get stuff out of the country, which China wants to do? How do you get the minerals out of there? In what currency do you trade if it's banning all foreign currencies? How does that work? It's almost as crazy as what's happening in Turkey with a dictator there who lowers interest rates when inflation is going gangbusters. How does that work? There is, fortunately, within this green and wonderful planet, room for these kind of people. I just don't understand it. As far as India is concerned, well, Modi may get some more consumption about that, but it's not exactly heading towards anything to do with climate changes. It's surely a nation like that ought to be making things more difficult for people to actually drive cars. Of course, it won't, because, as energy specialists all the way around the world know, developing economies need transport. That's what I think is happening here. It may increase consumption. It may not. It's not going to make people buy cars, but what it may do is it may lubricate the industry's way to trade and moving stuff around. That's what I'm guessing. I simply don't know. And as far as the University of Melbourne's concerned, well, good luck to them. I'm sure they know exactly what's going on in Australia. And remember, Australia is the world's largest exporter of coal. So, in other words, if they're saying that what's happening in COP26 isn't quite what they like, or is attempting to draw a slide rule over what's going on there, well, good luck to them. But unfortunately, the world is moving on, and we're going to see coal-producing companies, this 190 saying that they're going to get rid of coal consumption, but not yet, and it's not going to be tomorrow, and it might not be even in our lifetime. So how on earth the University of Melbourne is able to make any calculations whatsoever completely defeats me. I'd much rather keep to closer horizons and look at the efforts that politicians, and particularly business, particularly this Mark Carney Fund, for example, I think it's absolutely fascinating, to get together with major financial institutions and raise trillions of dollars to help people get over this transition, help businesses get over this transition. That's the way forward, not by the University of Melbourne, God bless them, lecturing us on where the world's going. What do they know?
All right, Michael, looking forward to the day where Rio Tinto will start making solar panels. Just looking forward. Thank you so much for your time. As always, we'll go to COVID-19 update. Adeso Omoro joins us. Adeso, great to have you. Morning.
Good morning, Rufai. Thank you. Good morning, Tundun. And good morning, Dr. Bat. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you. First time this week.
Morning, Adeso.
Our queen from Edo.
Morning,
and she specifically asked of you yesterday.
Yes. Very kind of
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, as always on Thursday, we have the weekly breakdown of the pandemic data as provided by the WHO epidemiological report. However, we'll use the Johns Hopkins University tally, which you have on your screen any moment from now. So the number of coronavirus cases has risen in Europe for the 5th consecutive week. It remains the only region where COVID-19 is still rising. It saw a 6% jump in the last 1 week, driven mostly by cases coming in from Britain, Russia, Turkey, and Romania. The weekly number for new infections in other regions fell or remained unchanged according to the WHO. And the sharpest drops were seen in the Middle East, where new cases dropped by 12%, in Southeast Asia, and in Africa, where they fell by 9%. Overall, 3 million new weekly cases were reported globally, and unfortunately, deaths from COVID-19 worldwide rose by 8%, and they were driven by Southeast Asia, where deaths spiked by 50% in the last 1 week. The WHO also said that the easier to spread Delta variant remains the dominant worldwide variant. It continues to mostly crowd out the other variants from sequencing that have been done by world agencies so far. Well, let's look at the data here in Nigeria. This is the daily data. In the last 24 hours, the NCDC reported 209 confirmed cases and 1 COVID-19 related deaths in Nigeria. The agency in charge of the data says 109 of the new cases are actually backlogged from Gombe State between the 16th of October and the 2nd of November. Well, vaccination also continues across Nigeria. It remains largely free for those ages 18 and above, except for those who decide to opt for private facilities in Lagos where a fee is being charged. But vaccines in Nigeria remain largely free. You should have a breakdown of the over 11 million doses administered so far in the country for the first and second doses in the 36 states and Federal Capital Territory on your screen. Lagos has administered the most. Almost 940,000 people receiving a first jab in Lagos and another 548,000 fully vaccinated, meaning they have received 2 shots of the available vaccines in Nigeria. And staying in Nigeria, one of the country's foremost university, the University of Ibadan, is restricting its physical graduation ceremony. Guess to who? Those who graduated with first-class honors. In a statement released, the Public Relations Officer for University of Ibadan, Olatunji Oladejo, said the decision was taken to curb the spread of coronavirus. Other graduating students can attend remotely. I wonder what your thoughts are on that. But very quickly, the World Health Organization has issued an emergency use listing for coronavirus vaccine. The first vaccine completely developed and manufactured in India. It's the first to receive the WHO approval. Now, the WHO says the jab, which is called Covaxin, is extremely suitable for low and middle income countries due to its easy storage requirements. Covaxin becomes the 8th vaccine, however, globally against COVID-19 that has received the approval from the WHO. It joins the likes of the Pfizer-BioNTech, the Moderna, the AstraZeneca, the Johnson & Johnson, Sinopharm, and Sinovac. And the WHO also said that this vaccine has 78% efficacy after 2 doses for months. Now, school children in the United States take the spotlight as the country enters a new phase of COVID-19 vaccination to curb deaths, hospitalizations, and more than a year of disrupted education. In his remarks yesterday, President Biden, who has just returned from his trip to Italy and Glasgow, called the CDC's authorization of the COVID-19 vaccine for the kids aged 5 to 11 as a giant step forward to further accelerate the U.S. path out of the pandemic. He described it as a day of relief and celebration for parents across the country and the country itself. Now, that age group 5 to 11 becomes the youngest age group yet to get vaccinated against COVID-19 in the U.S. And we expected to see about 28 million of them get vaccinated. It comes on a day Saudi Arabia also approved vaccines for that age group 5 to 11 in the country. Finally, this morning, let's go to Canada, where employers are firing or putting on unpaid leave thousands of workers who are refusing to get the COVID-19 jabs. Reports, however, suggest that the unvaccinated workers whose livelihoods are on the line are now flooding labor lawyers with calls. But it is unclear if they will get any reprieve from the courts. Canada has one of the world's strictest vaccine mandate policies, which came into effect last month.
Well, thank you, Ade. So I'll be really curious to see how that pans out for the Canadians who are consulting their lawyers now, because no court can compel anybody to employ somebody they do not want. However, those goalposts should be set, in stone from the outset. What do those employment contracts say, for example? So there are lots of issues that have been thrown up here. But the question is always about, where do your freedoms end and the rights of others begin? So I'm interested in that. And congratulations to India, and I'm glad, and the world, because the list of approved vaccines keeps growing. And here's my cue to bemoan the fact that there's no Nigerian vaccine on the list, but I'm going to skip that for today. I think we've had enough bad news about the Nigerian situation this morning, well, from me anyway, so I'm not going to go there, but I'm thinking it. As for University of Ibadan, I completely understand the precautions that have been taken. I think they just don't want any COVID cases, especially not any that result in death, on their conscience, because they'll think that, it's because this individual came and attended the ceremony here that they ended up falling ill. But on the other hand, it does seem extremely unfair to ban students who have worked so hard and parents who have invested so much and sacrificed so much from that moment that a lot of parents treasure, especially if it's a first degree. You do want your parents to be there. You want to take those pictures, don't you? I mean, we all know what it is to graduate. It's a very big deal. And then you're going to do it by Zoom or whatever. No, it doesn't quite cut it. I think that there should have been social distancing, and maybe you can only come with your parents. You don't need to come with this huge, entourage, just maybe 2 people per graduate. Something like that should have been arranged. I actually think it's really unfair.
Well, let me start with Canada. Canada has recorded about 83% full vaccination rate, but it also has this, COVID mandate, which is one of the strictest in the world. Perhaps because it was a campaign issue for the Prime Minister, who was re-elected in September 2021. And what you now find is that, look, it's not just for federal workers that this COVID-19 mandate is being enforced. It's also being enforced by the private sector, Queen's Hospital, Air Canada, and other stakeholders in that country. As Tunu said, yes, the big problem out there may be litigation, persons who are talking to their lawyers, and they are already doing so. The better problem is that, many of the counsel that have been contacted say that, look, refusal to take the shot cannot be a ground for litigation, because, in Canada, every legal matter is taken in contest. And here is a right of the community. It's public health issue that is at stake. The only people who are exempted, it will appear, are persons who are not taking the shot on the basis of religion or faith or belief. But what we have seen, however, is that in Canada, there's very strict insistence, that anybody that is above the age of 18, must take the vaccine. But generally, it is 83% vaccination rate. As for India, yes, Covaxin. Covaxin, that's the locally developed, vaccine in India, developed by the Bharat technological company, Bharat Tech, and also by the Institute of Medical Research of India and the Indian Institute of Virology. Now, this vaccine has already been in use in India. 110.6 million people have already taken that vaccine. But Bharat Biotech had applied for, emergency use approval by the WHO, passing it through what they call the EUL, emergency use listing. And now, that vaccine has passed the test. It's an antigen, attenuated, kind of vaccine. And it's found to be safe, easy to store, and it's been used also across Latin America, Venezuela, Brazil, many other countries have ordered it. But this is a major advancement for India in terms of what it has contributed. As for the University of Ibadan, well, it makes sense. In the face of COVID-19, many universities in the year 2020 postponed their convocation ceremonies. But this convocation of the University of Ibadan, yes, restricted to first-class holders, graduates, and also to winners of prizes and awards. But it will also be available online. And the students and parents who will not be allowed to come, are also required to be part of the ceremony. And I think that is a good way to take precaution, not to turn a convocation ceremony into a community spread event. And I won't be surprised if other universities follow that example. So the whole idea is about social distancing, and I think there isn't much to quarrel with in that regard.
All right, and this way, in the short time, I'm quite worried. I don't know what are the vaccine uptake numbers in Nigeria like. I don't see a lot of encouragement of people taking the vaccine, by the authorities. I think they should go out more, sell the vaccine more to people, encourage them to take it. I don't know what the numbers are like, but I don't think we're hitting the threshold already. And it's not because we don't have vaccines. There's availability of vaccines, but are people taking it? So how can we sell it even more for people to take?
Well, thank you very much, Adeso. I will see you again tomorrow morning.